This is the Passive 25K podcast, a podcast built around the vision of creating wealth through passive income for ourselves and others. The idea of creating income while you sleep seems like a dream come true, but for most professionals, turning this into a reality is a different story. On this show, you will hear real people breaking passive income streams down to the basics, giving you the next steps to start your own passive income journey. If you're new to the show, my name is Kyle Reedstrom from Fargo, North Dakota, where I get to work with my team of agents and investors each day to complete our goal of $25,000 a month in passive income. Now, let's get right into our next conversation. This is the Passive 25K podcast with Kyle Reedstrom, of course, home of Passive Income University and Cashflow Coaching. I'm excited to bring you episode 20, Invest to Live Your Perfect Lifestyle with Justin Donald. Justin, we're so glad to have you on the show, man.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm excited to be here and, had a fun time hanging with you this last week. So yeah, let's talk shop. Let's talk, money, investing, passive income. I mean, this is the stuff I just, I find in my free time, this is what I find myself talking about and reading about.
Yes, dude, that's how you know it's a passion. I think a lot of our audience finds themselves in the same place. Justin, we got to spend the week together last week at the Front Row Dads retreat down in Austin, which is really cool. And I've told you the story, but Front Row Dads was brought into my life because of your book, The Lifestyle Investor, with Ryan Levesque doing the foreword and telling how you guys engaged there. So really kind of unique circle here with you being on the podcast now and coming into Front Row Dads because to your credit. So, hey, that's my first thank you here, Justin. And dude, we had the privilege of being in a small group talking about business evolution. And just because we were spending time together, did you have any big takeaways from the retreat or that little business evolution little mastermind we did? I'd love to pick your brain.
Yeah, I mean, I always have takeaways. I have recognized early on in my life that I have a lot to learn, that there's just no way I'm ever going to know it. But if, on a regular basis, I can continue to get better, I'm just going to show up better in the things that I do. So my goal is, I love this whole idea of mastery, but there's only so many things you can be a master of. So I just want to get a little bit better each day. So Front Row Dads, I mean, I took a bunch of notes and I've got my date night with my wife tomorrow. We're going to do this omakase tasting at a restaurant here in Austin called Uchi, one of our favorites. And I'm going to give her my whole download and my takeaways. There were so many good ones. And then in our business evolution group, I just felt like there was some really thoughtful conversation around operations and, utilizing assistants, virtual assistants, executive assistants, like just a lot of different tiers and levels, and really kind of systematizing and gamifying business, for scale, for growth, for lifestyle. So yeah, every time I feel like I get some nuggets, and that's why I keep coming back. The people, and just getting a little better.
Yeah, that's funny. My date night with my wife is Wednesday to do the download, and we're gonna go have sushi, and that's what omakase is, right? That's what you're yes. Okay, there we go. So hey, look at great minds think alike here, Justin. Okay, I maybe had jumped ahead, put the cart in front of the horse a little bit because I want you to introduce yourself to our audience. I touched on the fact that you're the author of the book, The Lifestyle Investor, and that's been a lot of your branding, Justin. But tell us a little about yourself, where you started, and kind of how you got here.
Yeah, my book is really kind of this story that I wanted to tell. I've had friends for years say, you should write a book, you should teach a course, you should share the stuff that you're doing. And I just kicked the can down the road for a long time. I felt like I wasn't an author. I felt like, that wasn't my path, maybe one day. And so I had a buddy that said, well, what if you die and your daughter never learns all this cool stuff that you figured out about investing and money? And that hit me hard. Obviously, being a front row dad and just in general, like that, that morbid question and path really created some quick action. So, I mean, I literally started writing this book the next day. So I don't consider myself an author. I didn't really I didn't write it per se. That seemed like really daunting. So I just recorded myself talking, and I went through, just all these different experiences that I had, sessions of coaching people and investment results and returns. So yeah, I mean, I got my start like a lot of people do in the world of real estate. And um, I had read a lot of Robert Kiyosaki when I was young. That's really, I think, what opened my eyes to real estate. But I was in a place early on and really during and right after college where I felt like I didn't have the money. And because I didn't have the money, see, at that time, that was a limiting belief. I thought you had to have money to invest in real estate. And so I took some time kind of accumulating money and learned later that, oh, actually, when you have a good deal, the money is the easiest part. But to me, I didn't have money. So it was the toughest part, that was just a total mental barrier. So I actually started putting money in the stock market and had this horrible experience. I mean, everything was good for a period of time and everything looked good on paper. But when I started analyzing the numbers, I had this realization, wow, like these statements and my financial planner, they're telling me I'm making money, but when I add these numbers up, I'm losing money. So like, what's the deal here? And that's when I learned about this whole thing about an average rate of return, that you can manipulate the numbers to make them look better than they actually are. And that really, that was, I was so distraught after that, feeling like I had been taken advantage of completely. And so that was really a turning point for me where I said, all right, I'm done outsourcing my investments and financial life to someone else who gets paid whether I make money or not. I don't like that that relationship, that is very misaligned. And unfortunately, that's Wall Street for you. It's our financial institution. And I said, well, if I'm ever going to learn real estate, now's the time. And that was really it. I started looking into different types of real estate. I had a friend that had a bunch of single family homes, others with apartment complexes, others with triple net leases and commercial, some with retail. I mean, I've had friends with a little bit of everything, but one of my friends said, hey, I'm going to go to a mobile home park boot camp. I'm going to sell all my single family homes. I think this is just a better investment and asset class for the long run. And you get great cash flow today. Do you want to come with me? And I said, no, that sounds horrible. And after watching him succeed at a high level with it, I said, oh, okay, maybe I missed something. Maybe I was being a little too judgmental or not seeing the whole picture. And so then I decided to go to that boot camp and bought my first park that replaced my wife's income, bought my second park that replaced our survival income. So we didn't have to work. We couldn't maintain the lifestyle that we had if I didn't keep working, but I didn't have to work. And that was a huge weight off my shoulders.
Wow. I like how you just put that too. You replace your wife's income, you replace your survival income, and then you can continue to build from there. Justin, thanks for sharing your story there. We actually had Dane Espegard on the podcast to talk about mobile home park investing, and he had said you were the one that prompted him into going to that boot camp. Maybe after you did. I think that maybe it's how the story goes. So kudos to you for going eventually and then passing it on and saying, hey, I was a doubter, but now I'm a believer. That's pretty cool, man.
Well, it's interesting because you work really hard to find financial freedom, and you think it's going to do. I feel like we glamorize or glorify like being financially free. And by the way, I think we should find financial freedom, but in my head, it was going to feel a whole lot different than it felt. And the reality is when I achieved it, it was like, cool, this is great. Let's celebrate this. Okay, what's next? And it didn't feel the way I thought it would feel, but it did feel liberating. Like it put me in a different place mentally. And I think that's the most important thing. But at a certain point in time, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Sit around and do nothing? Like, I don't have to work. No, here's the key. Now I get to work. I don't have to work. I get to work. And that's a transition in itself. And that has really shifted me from, doing something that maybe I didn't love, or maybe I did, but I didn't still love it, to really focusing my time and energy on the thing that I love the most. But I also wanted my friends to experience that. So for me, instead of
Yes.
chasing more financially, I thought, well, what if I just help my friends have financial freedom? My friends like Dane Espegard and Nick Najar, another front row dad, a bunch of them. I've helped a bunch of them in this regard. And that's really, to me, Ryan Levesque helped him gain financial freedom. And, sometimes it's really hard when you have a big business that kicks off a lot of cash. You build this incredible lifestyle. So then it's even harder to find
Yeah.
financial freedom, right? And so, there's a beauty to the simplicity of it. But for me, it's the gift that keeps giving, because every time a friend or someone in my mastermind achieves financial freedom, I get to celebrate it again. It really just keeps going, and it feels good to offer that and have impact that way.
Yeah, that's really cool and validating to hear you speak of how you walked down the path, and then you started leaning into maybe what you were made to do. And our mission statement at Passive 25K Group is to build wealth through passive income for ourselves. And when we added the "and others" portion, it really lit up our world, because we realized, hey, if we're going to be doing some things, how are we also going to share these things? And this podcast is part of that. And it sounds like a part of your story as well. And and what I'm witnessing is, once you got to that point, Justin, that's when a lot of the major fruit came into your life with the lifestyle investor and different aspects of your mastermind. Man, it's just cool to see people get into that space where they can start doing work that's solving big problems and changing lives, really. So.
Well, that's the difference right there, right? I think there's a point in time where you work to live, you work to survive, you work to put food on the table. Maybe you upgrade uh, material possessions or home or job or whatever. So it's like, you work so hard to provide this, but then most people fall into this trap of like more. Well, I got a better job. I can get a better house. I can get a better car. And it just becomes more and more and more and more. And I think that there's this beauty of being able to step out and say, hey, what happens if I don't just consume? What happens if I, instead of taking the extra that I'm earning and putting it towards consumption and more stuff, I buy assets that produce income, and I can use that income to live. And eventually that income can cover everything. And then I can use those dollars experientially or on material possessions. I just personally find that I like doing events with people that I care about, that often can't do these things themselves. And I like experiences because people remember them. They
Yes.
last, whereas things don't. Material possessions don't. They get old, they break, they aren't as cool. Something better comes around, and you upgrade, you get rid of it, you sell it. So I like this whole idea of like experiences with people that I love and appreciate, and doing that as often as I can.
And that goes right into lifestyle. One of your main commandments that you explain in your book is lifestyles first. And that's what I'm hearing you say in that, Justin. And I always was really drawn to the title of your book. And I want to jump right in there. Your philosophy, it's called The Lifestyle Investor. And I hear you use the terminology cash flow investing. And I think a lot of people call it rental property investing, just investing in general. And it kind of gets broad, but you always say cash flow investing. And if you jump into the pages of the book, your commandments were so interesting and prompted the definition of what is cash flow investing as its own brand, as its own thing. And I love commandment 4 and 5, which is you're not going to invest unless it's going to cash flow almost immediately. Because how do we live? We need inflow of cash. You talked about the stock market. You put your money into equity, and what do you have? You don't pay the electricity bill with your stocks, generally speaking. And so I loved that commandment. And I also loved the aspect of your cash flow investing where you get your initial investment back as soon as you can. And I just wanted to let you touch on that, defining cash flow investing for our audience a little better, because I don't want people just to think these are two words put together. You've really branded it in your book.
Well, thanks for the kind words, Kyle. In my head, I never really wanted to I guess typecast it to a certain thing. I try and think of like the actors that get so upset that, like Jim Carrey for years, he couldn't get serious roles because he'd been typecasted as the comedian, right? And so I think that most people typecast cash flow investing with real estate. And I think real estate's a great component of it. It's a great way to do it. It's one of many. I've done cash flow with operating companies, with franchises, with senior secured debt, with other private credit opportunities in cannabis, music royalties, all different types of royalties, by the way, revenue shares, profit shares. I mean, you name it. I've probably researched it and likely have something in my portfolio that that encompasses whatever it might be. And for me, it's just, how do you buy assets that produce income, that produce enough income to cover your lifestyle, or at first your cost of living? So maybe it's not your lifestyle, but maybe it's just enough to live a good life. And then eventually you can work up to your lifestyle. And there are many assets that it can be. It does not have to be just a single one. And in fact, I think it makes sense over time to diversify into different things so you're not over concentrated. One thing that banks look at is concentration risk. Do you have too much of your assets in, or too much capital, or too much of your portfolio in one specific asset class, or one specific asset, And so I think that in our own portfolios, we should look at that. But yeah, when I look at cash flow, I look at how do I get utility today? If you're in the stock market, most people aren't taking those dollars today. That's for whenever people retire. And hopefully the market doesn't dip. Hopefully we don't have a recession leading up to it, because that money, it's hard to make that money back in 10, 20, 30 years when you have a big drawdown. And then a lot of people have, equity type investments that are paper money, like venture or early stage, angel investing, or, even late stage that doesn't, exit for a while, or something happens. It looks like there's a lot of money, but you don't get utility out of it. I want to own assets that have utility today, that I can use it today. My family benefits today. And then part of my way of de-risking that deal is making sure it cash flows right away, so I'm not banking on appreciation. If something cash flows and there's a recession, or whatever might happen, there's another COVID, there's whatever it is, then I'm not forced to sell, because I can cover the debt service, or I can cover, I've got enough to keep it afloat, so I never have to take a bad price. And then I like that return of principal quickly, because that also de-risks the deal, and it gives me some velocity of money. The quicker I can get my money back, the more I can put it to work in another deal. And so, I talk about in getting this principal back quickly, how it can compound over 3, 4, 5 years, where let's say I do a 1-year note, but I negotiate an equity kicker, which is just free equity. Basically, I'm getting, I'm getting some sort of interest on my money, but because I was able to negotiate it, I get some equity for free. So I get a balloon of my payment back at 1 year. I get, payments every month or every quarter inside that year, get all my money back, but then I still have equity, even though my money's back. And then I can take that and invest in another deal for a year. And maybe this is an operating company where I set up an accelerated distribution schedule with partners that run it and say, hey, I'll be the money in, but I want all money out until my initial investment's paid back. And I've had several businesses that have totally paid me back inside of 6 months to a year.
Wow.
Some longer, some even shorter. I've one that paid me back in 4 months. So, that's just another example of having all my money out of a deal again, but then still have an equity in that deal, and I can repurpose the same dollars. And I've done, many syndications, and where I invest as an LP. I actually don't raise money. I've never actually done my own syndication. I've always put my own money in my own deeded real estate. But I often will invest in other people's syndications if they've got a great track record. So
Mm.
I have this really fun example where over 5 years, I took the same $100,000, put it into 5 different deals. I got paid cash flow each year in a different deal until I got that money back. But then I had equity after it. And so my goal is to replicate what the banks do. The banks use fractional reserve lending, right? Well, how do I do that in even less risky way? How do I do that in a way where my assets can grow even faster and compound more because I have upside, but I have no downside risk? The moment I have all my money out of the deal, I got no risk. I've
Yeah,
eliminated it all, but I still have upside opportunity if something goes really well with that investment.
man. I think there's so much there, and I love it. I think it's going to be a lot of ahas. I think it's going to be music to people's ears because you're talking about the concept of recycling dollars again, killing the limiting belief that you need this huge egg of money in order to create this huge cash flow. You're using the same recycled money, and I also really love the concept. I think people think of investing as one big thing. And what you're talking about is, hey, if your equity's over here, you're not touching that. You break it down so simply. I want money that I can use today for my family to do things. I think that's huge. And I think it's just breaking that down for people. I want to get in. You touched on a couple examples, Justin. I'd love to hear you share. Let's go through one. As open as you want to be. How did this work for you recently, or maybe a project that comes to your head where you're doing exactly this practice? You're getting immediate cash flow on something. You're getting your return back. Dive into one for us a little bit if you would.
Is there a certain niche that you're interested in? Because I've got, probably 300 or so active deals right now. So I could probably go in any direction. So I don't know
Yeah.
if you're
I
wanting to
like
go
it.
down a path of like what's easiest for your audience or something different that they haven't heard of.
I think a lot of people are familiar with the Burr strategy and applied to real estate, but I'd really be curious to hear an example of how you've done this with like a small business,
Okay.
And how you've kind of negotiated, how you set up those terms in order to get that small business launched with your capital or your investment, get your money back, and then how much the cash flow is in your equity position and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll share a business that we recently sold. So we bought a dog training company, and that might sound weird because anyone who knows me, they know that I don't have a dog. I've never owned a dog. I don't know the first thing about dogs. I really don't.
Do you like dogs, Justin?
I like other people's dogs. I don't
Okay,
want
there
the
you go.
responsibility of having a dog. Like I feel like it limits my ability to go do stuff,
That's
And
fair.
by the way, that may just be a false belief. My daughter would love for us to get a dog. She loves pets, period, but dogs more than anyone I know. So we've got, it's funny. We actually have a bunch of cats that are neighborhood cats. So she's getting some of her goal without us actually having to have pets. But
This is smart. Yes.
yeah,
Well, that's
great,
good.
great way to do it for us. My wife's kind of on the same page as me. But I just noticed this trend during COVID that my neighbors were all buying dogs. And I had friends that are like, I'll never buy a dog. And they did. And I had other friends that are like, I'll never buy another dog. And they did. And so I just saw all these people buying dogs. And then my friends were like going crazy about, dogs going to the bathroom and tearing stuff up. And I was like, man, a dog training company seems like a great idea. So found a dog training company in Kansas City, a company called KC Dogs. And we ended up basically, so I had a friend that I'd worked with in a previous business that was working in corporate America. One of my goals is not only to, have good investments and help people have financial freedom, but how can I help people even with the first step of their journey, which is, for many people, it's get out of corporate America or get out of the rat race, kind of get into the entrepreneurial space. For the record, I don't think you need to do that to be happy, to find financial freedom. But I think in this instance, and in a lot of instances, that's a great way to go. And so my friend was making $65,000 a year at his corporate job, but the business that we bought, the owner was paying himself $75,000 a year. So it was like, hey, why don't we just have you run this business. You get a $10,000 pay raise. I'll give you a whole bunch of equity, way more than I need to, because my goal is to like help you, you know, really find financial freedom, or at least get out of the rat race, at least the start, of being an entrepreneur and moving in a more positive direction, because I knew this is what he wanted. And so, and for me, like, what's an extra 5, 10, 15, 20%? Like it's irrelevant to me and in my life, but it's very relevant to someone else. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So he had total skin in the game. He put his life savings, or close to his life savings, into the deal, which wasn't a ton, but I needed him to have skin in the game too. And then I was the rest of the money. And so I came in with the down payment. We got lending secured through one of my relationships, but I made him do it. I made him get it. He had to sell it. He had to go through it all, but he used many of my contacts. Cool. And on that one, I was able to negotiate myself off of the personal guarantee, or down to 20% right out of the gates. So most of the banks wanted me to be 100% personal guarantee. It's great to know for anyone who's like looking into, even with your home mortgage, everything is negotiable. Banks, people look at banks like there's no negotiating with them, and they just sign the docs. I negotiate everything. I negotiated my home mortgage down. I negotiated some different rates. I negotiated a unique structure on our home, that locked in, a 30-year rate, but gave us 10 years of interest only, so that I could take the extra overage and invest it at a much higher clip than, being locked in on a mortgage. And so I do this with all the banks. So I negotiated, for this acquisition, this dog training company, down to a 20% personal guarantee. And then what I did was I structured the agreement. So I actually gave him the majority of equity in this company, which I have a lot of friends that think that's crazy, but you know what? I think it was incredibly motivating for him, and just, he saw this as his opportunity to make it big. But for the distribution, I said, hey, I'm putting 100K down. I'd like to get that back quickly. And so in this instance, I got paid, I think we either did 80 or 90% accelerated distribution. So even though I'm the minority equity holder, I got paid, I think it was 80% of the distributions until I was paid back in full. I think did another deal with him, where I got paid 90% until I was paid back in full. But in this deal, this is a super cash flow heavy business. We just optimized some of the SEO. This thing was, we got this thing, believe it or not, we cranked this thing out to profit. This was profiting like 10 to 12,000 a day until we ran out of like appointments. So we like sold 6 months into the future. And the only way we could have kept up that profit is if we had expanded, got another location, got a bigger location, which we didn't want to do. So we were flush with cash. I got all my money out of the deal in about 4 months. And then at a year and a day, and by the way, Patrick Mahomes trained his dog in our studio, which is really cool.
That's awesome.
So for any of you Chief fans or Mahomes fans, that was a really cool experience. And what I would say is, at a year and a day, we decided to sell because of long-term capital gains instead of short-term capital gains. We had an interested party. We thought that this would be a good move to take this capital and put it into something else. And so we ended up selling this thing. It was an 11x total. So we made more than the cost of the business in just cash flow. And then we sold it for twice what we bought it for. So it was pretty substantial. We did that all inside of a year and a day. And so, and the interesting thing is, all my friends that are like, you gave too much away. That's crazy. You could have been 80 or 90% of that thing. What they don't know is that my partner came back and said, hey, I've got money now. I want to invest in these other businesses, but I don't have the ability to personally guarantee it with the bank. They need someone else. So I got into a position where he said, you're my first call and I want to give you equity and you don't have to put any cash in because we have the cash. So that's where I
Wow.
started doing balance sheet investing. So I just said, oh yeah, sure. I'll guarantee this. And by the way, I negotiated my personal guarantee down. So I think I'm still a 20% personal guarantee on this. Um, so I'm limited, but I was able to get 25% of every location that we've done, but I didn't have to put any cash out of my, out of pocket for it. And so that's just another great reminder that, when you're, when you can be generous, not because of what you get, but a lot of cool stuff happens when you're not trying to optimize for the deal and you're trying to optimize for the relationship.
Man, Justin, that's an amazing story and such a cool ties to impact. Um, and what we want to do is, I want to hear more stories. I think when we get back, we're gonna maybe toss it back to some of the commandments in your book, but also tying into a few more of these stories because I think that's so impactful to hear how A, you structured it, and then B, the back end of how that ended up playing out. I think it's amazing lessons. So we'll be right back after this break. Hey, wanted to take a quick break from this week's episode. Wondering if you ever ask yourself, how do I get started in this stuff? Or if I'm already doing it, what are some next steps or people that are doing the same thing that I want to do, people on this passive income journey? Well, we were getting that question and we created a community of passive income investors called Passive Income University. This is a place where you can watch videos, things that we've done, where we put tools and information, where we've built a community of people that can communicate, ask questions, and grow together to start their passive income journey. And eventually we complete our passive income journey together. If you're interested in more info on Passive Income University, check us out at p25kg.com. Okay, we are back with episode 20, Invest to Live Your Perfect Lifestyle with Justin Donald. Justin, you shared some really, really cool, in-depth examples. The dog training company from the first half, which I think was such a unique story, but a great example of the application of this lifestyle investing, cash flow investing concept. And I want to dive into some of the 10 commandments that are in your book. You have 10 commandments for the lifestyle investor. But I want to tie them back to examples because I just found a ton of value in you sharing that one. And you did also share that you have many, many of these examples. So let's dive in a little bit. I want to go to two of the commandments. And again, I hope our audience can dive into Justin's book. It's really valuable. It's a really unique perspective. And you'll understand the references from the podcast here. Commandment 6 was find an income amplifier. And then commandment 7 kind of went along that with plus the deal. I'm going to challenge you here, and I'm going to say, with those two commandments, do you have any examples or even parts of different acquisitions or deals you've done where you're applying those commandments?
Yeah, I could give a number of different examples on this one. My goal is that I'm always trying to negotiate a piece of upside. So finding an income amplifier, it's just like, the example I talked about where I find someone willing to give me an equity kicker or give me a warrant kicker, which is just, an option to buy more equity at a set price at a later period of time. Should that company be performing well, I have the right to execute that and own more of it. And I just like when I can get that for free, And so the whole idea of like find an income amplifier, it's how do we make this deal better? Like when someone gives you a deal, it's probably good for them already. They're the ones that are presenting it to you. That doesn't mean it's good for you. So like for me, I've got to evaluate what they gave me may be a win for me, but it might not be. I don't want to just take it at face value. And then the other thing is generally people want different things. So there are certain terms that some people want. There are certain terms that other people want. I have found that usually I want different things than what other people want. So for them, if it's a certain sale price, then I'm happy paying that sale price. Here are some of the, things that I would want for that sale price. So that's kind of how I look at that one is like, what else can I get? How can I make this deal better? Can I get some things for free? So that's my mindset there. And then going one step further on the next one, which is plussing the deal. So maybe I get more. This is a way to say, hey, can you also add this to it? But it's also a way to protect the deal. So maybe it's not getting more. Maybe it's just getting better protection. How is this deal collateralized? Let's say that, because I try to look at every deal like it's going bad. So if this deal goes bad, how can I lose? Okay, well, now I know how I can lose. How do I protect against that? Right. So a lot of the time, I'm just really trying to, protect the downside risk, whatever that might be, whatever that might look like. So let's talk examples. I mean, I gave one in my book that I think is very fitting for this because one of the things that I've found, I mean, I started investing in e-commerce really early, which is another, when Commandment 3 is talking about invisible deals. And I like finding like off-market deals, but it's also talking about like trends and like what is to come. What are buying habits or shopping habits of millennials, because that's going to be en vogue. And it's a huge group, right? So like this is the future of the way that the masses are going to be spending money, right? The people that are actively spending the most money. And so I saw e-commerce being one of those. I saw cannabis being one of those. I saw mobile home park investing. A lot of these, single family home rentals, I got into that early, like before it was even deemed, or I guess right after it was deemed an official asset class. And so these are all trends that I noticed that I thought made sense to get into, not just because I'm hoping or predicting that this is the trend, but if I'm wrong and it's not the trend, I'm pretty protected to not lose money on the way out. Does that make sense? So I have a hard time taking a big risk and saying, hey, I think the future is going to be here, unless that risk says, hey, and if it's not here like I think, then the max I can lose is this, or it's collateralized to the point of my total investment. So at a minimum, I get my money back, right? So that's kind of how I analyze and assess these. So we can use an e-commerce example because there are a bunch of brands that I've helped buy out of bankruptcy. The first one was Dress Barn, which is a women's fashion retail clothing store. The Ascena Group owned that brand, and they were cutting it loose. It was about to be in bankruptcy. We bought it out of pre-bankruptcy, and we bought it for a killer price, just for a few $1,000,000. But we bought the brand name that has been in business for 60 years. We bought the IP. We bought the customer list. So it's the difference between a startup, which is like you're starting a brand new brand, or a late stage company where you've like most of the risk is done because it's trying to get the brand recognition, So this was really interesting because we knew, and by the way, we got an offer to sell it for twice as much as what we bought it for the week afterwards. So we knew we were onto something. But I put my money into that deal. I negotiated a note, and inside of this note, I negotiated monthly distributions, 20% interest. So these payments so every month I'm getting a payment. At 1 year, I get all my money back. It is senior secured. So I'm in the first position. So if anything should go wrong, I get to take the brand. I get to take the IP. I get to take the customer list. So that was a unique structure. So downside, very protected. And then I was able to negotiate, one income amplifier was a cash bonus at the end. So when the deal closed, another 10% return on my money. So at 1 year, I get all my money back, plus 10%, plus 20% over the course of the year. So in effect, it was a 30% return. Okay. And then I negotiated another income amplifier, which was an equity kicker. And so that equity I got all my money back in a year. But I still have equity in this brand, and this brand now is crushing it. It's e-commerce only. We closed all retail stores. This thing has scaled beautifully. It is net positive, so it is EBITDA positive, and it covers its own debt service, which is really impressive to do inside of a year. Now it's been a couple years, but technically it's been 3 years now. But after that year, I had all my money out, so I was in a risk-free position with only upside,
Man.
which is really cool. So that's one example. And you can do this, like I'm giving this example, you can do this with all kinds of businesses. We did this in the cannabis space as well, where there are, about 200 regional banks that can actually open up accounts. It's federally illegal cannabis, but state by state, there are different laws and rules. And so federally, the big banks, they can't do anything. There's no lending in this space from a banking standpoint because it's federally illegal. But there are banks that are opening up accounts. So you can actually see the financial transactions. You can actually audit it and know that these companies are doing really well in one of these 200-ish regional banks. And so we found a bunch of companies that are killing it, but they don't want to give equity away because they know how valuable their brand is. So we can negotiate some killer interest rates, anywhere from 15 to 30% with warrants and equity kickers, right? This is just free. So we get all of our money back. I've done countless deals where we get all of our money back inside of a year, or 2 years, or 6 months, or whatever it is. But then we have equity in the company. And we got cash flow during that period of time. And these have been very fruitful for us because I can get in and get out. I can repurpose that money. I've got upside. I've got cash flow the whole time. And a lot of the time when I do this with the bigger groups, maybe in a fund structure, I can negotiate preferred terms for my mastermind, for my group of people that want to join the investment with me. And so maybe we get lower minimums or reduced fees or increased returns. I mean, all these things are things that we've negotiated into these deals.
Wow. I think a lot of this, it sounds unique to deals you're doing. Maybe people haven't heard this before, but I just love being exposed to some of the ways you're structuring this. And I mean, some of it's just having the tools in your tool belt to be able to put deals like this together and have the knowledge around the negotiation. So I want to walk through this a little bit. I like practical examples. If let's say I'm a cannabis company. I'm in Fargo, North Dakota, and we know that we have a future in this space. North Dakota's on the way, like you mentioned, with many states. And I love my brand. I love my company. But I need to take on investment. I need to take on investment to grow. A lot of these companies, I would say, Justin, are probably in that space where that's why they're looking into this. Is for scale. Is why they're entertaining other investors, right?
Yeah.
And so then you're coming to me and you're saying, hey, I'm an investor, I'm a group. And like I said, I don't want to give up equity, but you're structuring this deal in a way where you're going to be a debt investor, Justin, and walk me through maybe what you would offer me in this situation and why this would be a plus for me and why this would be a plus for you as the investor.
Well, most people are used to equity only investments. Like the vast majority of the world, they're investing in the stock market. I mean, that's almost exclusively a true, on the equity side, that's a true equity play. Or you're investing in a company. Maybe you're an angel investor, which is the riskiest way to invest. Generally, it takes 100 unique investments to get one that actually wins, that has a big return. But a lot of people don't know it's that risky, and they think, oh, I got the inside track, I'm going to invest in this early stage company, only to find out that it didn't work out. But they don't find it out for 20 years. So they've done that same thing for 20 years, right? So most people just, when they think of investing, they just think of investing in equity. I put X amount in and I get this percentage of the company, or this percentage, this many shares, right?
Yeah.
But that's not always the most efficient way to invest. Like for a lot of people that think that their company is going to be worth a ton, they would rather pay really high interest than to give up equity. So what if you could pay, like, what if I could structure a deal and say, hey, and by the way, I didn't say this before. So like one thing that I do no matter what is to make it not risky is I want to collateralize all the assets you have against the money that I'm putting in, right? All the
Yeah.
assets of the business, in states where they restrict the cannabis license, the licenses themselves are worth
Wow.
anywhere from 10 million to 100 million. So you could just collateralize against that license and be way ahead. So for example, like let's say I'm putting in, or my group is putting in $1 million, but we've got an asset that's worth $10 million. If you default, we take that, right?
Yes.
So that there's just, it's so hard to lose money when you set it up that way. So that'd be the first thing. Like, do you have real estate? Do you have equipment? Do you have a license in a restricted state? Do you have sometimes it's membership interest that we collateralize with. So if you don't, if you default, if you don't do as you agreed to do, then we get to take over part of the company. But people are willing to do it because when they know their business is good and they can figure that out, then hey, this is kind of par for the course. So yeah, I would make sure that there's assets that collateralize the loan. I would say, I want it to be a good return, a good interest rate. Since there's no lending in the space on an institutional level or on a banking level, there's no competition. So rates tend to be pretty high.
Yes.
And then I would say, hey, I'd like a little equity. I want a little upside. I'm not investing for straight equity, but I want a piece of it. It doesn't have to be big, but I'm hooking you up with what you need today. And I'm, foregoing investing straight equity. So I just want a small piece along with the interest.
Yes. Yeah. Man, I like to get exposed to just how your perspective behind this, and I think that's what a lot of your material does. With shifting to Commandment 10, which is every investment dollar gets a return. There was some really cool quotes that you had in the book, and it was one of the things you said is no one can ever foreclose or bankrupt your brain. And so you talk a lot about investing in yourself, investing in coaching, investing in the knowledge, investing in podcast listening like this, and learning how to structure deals like this instead of on the job. That's going to stick with you. And then Kiyosaki has a quote where I want to ask you this question. You said this quote in the book: business owners can stop running a business, or the definition of moving from business owner to investor. Kiyosaki says it's when a business owner can stop running their business for over a year and it actually grows in the time without them. And that's when when it's an actual business and not a sole proprietorship is where the quote comes from. And it talks about the concept of moving from business owner to investor. And I think so many people in this space of passive income financial freedom have opportunities in business, opportunities, like this dog training company, but then they get stuck in the business owner seat. And you've been intentional to know that you've been there. Your goals for lifestyle are outside of that quadrant. They're in the investor quadrant. And I think I just want to hear maybe how you've done it. I mean, maybe we know some of the how, but how some of our audience members could really get out of that business owner seat and kind of rip that Band-Aid off and get into a passive income, financial freedom lifestyle where that dog training company is running itself because of how you structured that. And a lot of that's finding your partner. That was part of that. But just speak to that a little bit, Justin. I think that's a huge thing in this space.
Yeah, I love this commandment. It's one of my favorite commandments, and I can expand a little bit on it because it's not even just the actual dollars getting invested. It's the education that you learn when you spend those dollars, right? If I'm investing in a CPA to do the work, an attorney to do the work, like I don't want you to just do the work. I want you to teach me what you're doing and why you're doing it so that I have a foundation of more knowledge and education for later. The whole reason that lifestyle first is my very first commandment for cash flow investing is because I don't want to fall in the trap of buying a job. A lot of people buy businesses, but they don't realize they just bought a job. They just bought more hours of working. And that's not the trade that I want. So I might leave opportunity on the table, meaning like I could optimize better. I could maximize return better. but my goal is not to maximize return. My goal is to maximize lifestyle. So how do I get the best return I can, but keeping the priority in place, which is my time is my most valuable resource. And the people that I spend it with, that's so meaningful to me. So I'm very intentional about when I work, when I don't work. And I don't want to not work. I actually enjoy working when I'm focused on the things that really fill me up the most and the people that fill me up. But I like having an extended weekend. I mean, I have extended weekends every weekend. Fridays and Mondays, I don't schedule stuff like that's,
Mm-hmm.
I like to work Tuesday to Thursday, and I like to, have some good time and some good energy, some good creative sessions. But at the end of the day, like I'm optimizing my life, my health, my relationships, and that to me is just so important. And I think if I have to leave a little equity on the table, some people look at me like I'm crazy. Like even when I left, my business originally, once replaced my income that I was earning, people are like, "You're crazy. You could be making twice as much." But that was never the goal. I wasn't trying to make more money. I was trying to buy my time back. And so I think that culturally we get stuck in this trap of like, I'll do whatever it takes to make more money because that's the highest priority. That's the most glorious thing. But from a true wealth standpoint, I mean, one of my favorite quotes is that the whole um, idea or difference between rich people have a lot of money, but wealthy people have a lot of time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so that's really what I want to own.
That's that is such a refreshing thing for everyone to hear, and it's right along what's your priority? What's the goal you keep coming back to? And you said your goal was lifestyle driven. Your goal was lifestyle. I mean, and the money is always going to be that carrot that floats in front, and it's going to lull you into buying another job, as you put it. I think that that's so important. Justin, we were in that business evolution circle that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and you had spent some time with Richard Branson this last year, and you spent a lot of time. I'm sure you said you had pages of notes, but you had one major takeaway, and I'll let you share from there.
Yeah, and first and foremost, Richard's an amazing guy, super down to earth, wonderful to hang out with, treats you like you're the only person around, and like he really enjoys being there. It was quite the experience. And I had 7 days of wonderful time with him. But I think the number one thing he said, if you want to be a great entrepreneur, and this is a man that owns almost 500 businesses, right? He said, if you want to be a great entrepreneur, then you need to get out of the building. You shouldn't run it. You need to hire people to run the business, and you need to get the heck out of there. Um, and so that's so powerful coming from him. And he's got all these successful businesses because they don't depend on him. They don't rely on him. He has teams that run them, and he can work through them. He's kind of like a chairman of the board, not a C-suite executive. He's not the president. He's not the chief operating officer. He's not the chief financial officer. He is like a chairman of the board that, pokes his head in to make sure things are going well and connects with key people in some sort of a cadence, but doesn't run any day-to-day in any business that he has.
Wow, and that's crazy to boil it down into a takeaway like that. I know for a fact there's doers listening to this podcast. I'm one of them, and I get drawn into getting my hands dirty into the rental properties we own locally, or the business operations, or the meetings that are discussing what's happening. And getting out of the building sounds scary. I'm sure some people are like, how could I? But again, Kiyosaki's definition is if the business is running and you're not part of it for over a year and it's still growing and thriving. And if we're following the cash flow quadrant of starting and running a business is different than investing and buying businesses. And that's what we're talking about Richard Branson doing in that quote. And I just want to urge people that are doers, that have their hands in the cookie jar constantly. I'm speaking to myself. For listening to some of Justin's wisdom in this and Richard's wisdom in this, how can we move into this true position as investors and key in on our actual goal, which is freedom and lifestyle? I think that's such a takeaway from our time with you, Justin. And I just appreciate you being here, man. This has been a really, really fruitful experience to get to know you, be in Front Row Dads with you, and then for you to come on the podcast. Any final thoughts to speak to our audience of people that are maybe listening to this podcast?
Yeah, I think peer group matters more than most people realize. Having mentors matters. When I couldn't find a mentor, I didn't have anyone in my network or community that I felt like lived the life that I wanted to live or understand, that at that time understood business or investing the way that I wanted to. I resorted to reading books. And so my mentors became authors. And then the more that I moved down that path, the more I found people that aligned with the things that I wanted. But even more over than a mentor and a coach, maybe I shouldn't say more over, but like just as important is a peer group of people playing the game of business and life and investing and wealth creation at a higher level, to be challenging and pushing you, because the mindset, like we all have this mindset, even that what you talked about before, where you said, yeah, I'm such a doer, I just get in and I get my hands dirty. And by the way, I think in a season of life, that's incredible. But the thing that got you to where you are today is likely not going to be the thing that gets you to where you want to go. And I think there's this conditioning that happens with work harder, earn more money. It's like these cultural traps, but there's conditioning. Like we've seen our parents do it. We've seen other people reward it. There is this reward system based on it. And I think we have to kind of detach from that and say, wait a minute, I don't want to fall into line with maybe what my boss is promoting, who, there's an agenda that he has in me doing this. And by the way, I think there are a lot of great bosses out there. I just think we need to make our own decisions, right? We need to make the decision of, wait a minute, do I actually need to work this hard? Wait a minute. Could I actually make more by working less? If so, how would that look? And so I think we want to be around people that think that way, that think differently, that think at a higher level about those types of things. So peer groups, mentors, coaches, and not just a coach, right? Today, everyone's a coach. Everyone's a life coach. Even if they've never done it before, it's crazy to me. I mean, a coach, you have done it before and you can teach me exactly what you have done. That's what I mean when I say a coach and a mentor.
Yes.
So yeah, that's really what I would say is your peer group, the people around you, the way that you're getting your education, that matters.
That's good advice, man. And thanks for sharing that. Justin, for people listening, people that are drawn to your message and what we talked about today, how do they find you? What's the best way for them to check out what you're up to?
Well, probably the best way is to go to lifestyleinvestor.com. There's all kinds of resources there, from free to high ticket and everything in between. For your audience, I'd love to offer anyone who wants a free copy of my book. Go to lifestyleinvestorbook.com lifestyleinvestor.com/free book. And you just pay shipping and we'll send you a book. And all the proceeds, if you do buy it on Amazon or wherever else, all the proceeds go to different organizations that stop human trafficking. So I'm really proud of the amount of money that the Lifestyle Investor book has raised for that, and will continue to raise, because I have vowed to never take a profit from this book. And so that is important to me. And I think it's, I know it's important to other people too. But beyond that, I mean, I've got a free blog, I've got a podcast with some really fascinating people and successful people that have accomplished a lot in life. I've got an online course, a masterclass on passive investing and on mobile home park investing, a mastermind that is application only, and pretty long wait list at this point in time. But for the right person, for the right fit, probably makes sense to apply.
So cool, man. Justin, it's been a joy to get to know you in the short time we've been in the Front Row Dads together, that I've been in there together. I'm so thankful for the prompt from Ryan in your book that got me into that group, that world, that peer group that you talk about. And cheers to the future, man, for being a great dad, a great husband, and a great person in business, and living the life you want to live. So thanks for being on here, man.
Well, thank you, Kyle. I appreciate it, and I can share the same thoughts and sentiments with you, and how you're showing up and how you're living life as well. So it's always great to be in community with other people that share the same values that you share, and that's where I love spending time building relationships and creating experiences, and that's really what makes life so amazing, in my opinion.
I agree. Thanks so much, Justin. Take care. This has been the Passive 25K podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future conversations. Also, tell us what you thought by leaving a comment below on today's topic. If something really hit with you, don't be afraid to share this with someone else that's interested in passive income. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll catch you next time for another episode of the Passive 25K podcast.